Okay, so let's unpack this. We are starting today with a question that it sounds really simple on the surface,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
but if you actually sit with it for a minute, it's kind of terrifying. The question is from an author, Xu Feng, and he just asks, where are we going?
Right.
And then right after that, what should we do?
It sounds like the start of a 3 a.m. midlife crisis, doesn't it? But in the context of the material we're covering today, these are not just rhetorical questions.
Not at all.
They're the absolute foundational pillars for an entire social experiment. Shuafeng isn't just asking, he's proposing this radical answer that involves dismantling almost everything we think we know about how society is supposed to work.
We are talking about a blueprint for a completely alternative society. The sources describe something called the Communist Community Second Home.
Also known as the Life Zen Courtyard.
Right. And before you tune out thinking this is just some abstract philosophy, this is a documented real-world experiment. The goal, to solve human suffering. The method.
Mm.
Well, that's where it gets wild.
It really does.
We're talking about abolishing marriage, eliminating private property, and running a society on something they call chaos management.
It's a heavy lift, for sure, but the core argument, it creates this fascinating logical chain. The premise is this. Your life's direction is determined by your choices,
Okay.
and your choices are determined by your values. So if you're unhappy with the destination, whether that's you as an individual or, humanity as a species, you can't just change the tires. You have to change the engine. You have to rewrite the values.
And to prove that values aren't just these fluffy, feel-good concepts, the source material actually kicks off with some hard data. There's this tracking study from Harvard they cite. It went on for 25 years. You know the one I'm talking about.
I do. It's a classic reference point in behavioral psychology. They took a cohort of young graduates, people with similar intelligence, similar backgrounds, all that,
Right. Similar potential.
and they just tracked them based on one variable, their goal-setting habits.
The stats are actually kind of brutal. I want to run through them because they really set the stage for why Zhifeng thinks values are so critical. So 27% of these graduates, they had no goals at all.
None.
The text calls them complainers. They just sort of drifted through life.
Right. They became the people who let life happen to them instead of making life happen. Then you had the big chunk, 60%, with blurry goals.
I want to be happy.
Exactly. I want to be successful. But they couldn't define what that meant. They ended up in the middle to lower class, stable, but unremarkable.
Then you have the 10%. They had clear short-term goals. I want to get this promotion or I want to buy this house. These became the professionals, the doctors, the lawyers.
But the outliers, that's the top 3%.
The top 3%.
These were the people who had clear long-term goals, a vision that spanned decades, and 25 years later, they weren't just successful, they were the industry titans, the social elites. The argument the source material is making isn't just write down your goals. It's that having a specific long-range value system is the primary driver of your physical reality.
So the logic is the Harvard elites use their values to build empires and accumulate wealth. Xie Feng is asking, what happens if we use that same power, that same value setting, but we swap out the values?
Exactly.
What if we build a second home instead of an empire?
Exactly. He's proposing a value system designed not for financial dominance or political power, but for something he calls chaos.
We definitely need to put a pin in that word chaos, because in this context, it does not mean what you think it means.
No, it's not riots and burning cars.
But before we get to the chaos, let's look at the menu. The text breaks down human values into 8 specific factors. It's like a mixing board for the human soul.
That's a great analogy.
You've got money, God, wisdom, beauty, harmony, reputation, friendship, and sex.
And depending on which sliders you push up and which you push down, you get a different kind of human being. Shufeng outlines what he calls the standard life views that trap most people. For instance, the material desire view. That's the money slider, maxed out.
Or the physiological satisfaction view. Eat, drink, satisfy the senses.
Right.
I think I recognized a few people I know in the reputation category. The text describes them as people obsessed with leaving a name.
Leave a legacy. Very ego-driven.
Totally.
Which he argues is a trap. He also lists the fatalist, people who just resign themselves to fate. And then there's the self-sacrifice view. Now, this is interesting.
Yeah.
Because usually we frame self-sacrifice as a virtue, right? But Xu Feng compares this view to a silkworm or a candle. You burn yourself out to serve others, but you destroy yourself in the process. He says that's not enlightened, it's just another form of imbalance.
So if those are the standard settings that lead to suffering,
Yeah.
what's the alternative? The text introduces the worldview of the Zen grass. First of all, Zen grass.
It's the name the community members use for themselves. It implies something lowly, common, ubiquitous,
Yeah.
but incredibly resilient and alive.
You can skip on it, but it bounces back.
Exactly. And their worldview, which they call the Hunden view, it completely flips the mixing board.
How so?
Well, it places God in the Tao, or natural law, at the very center. It explicitly views the traditional family unit as a sea of bitterness.
Wow. Sea of bitterness.
Yeah.
That is some strong branding for family life.
Isn't it? And it prioritizes happiness, freedom, and this concept of chaos above all the other stuff like social status or money.
Okay, let's get into the mechanism. They claim to run this community on chaos management. Now, to me, chaos management sounds like a polite way to describe a toddler's birthday party.
Right, it sounds like a disaster.
It sounds like a total disaster.
It does sound counterintuitive, but we have to clarify the term. In this philosophy, chaos, or Hunden in the original concept, it doesn't mean disorder. It refers to the primordial state of the universe. Before we humans started drawing lines and making rules and building fences.
So it's more like
Yeah.
natural state management.
Precisely. It's the idea of non-management.
Mm.
The philosophy argues that human laws and regulations and all these administrative structures, they actually create friction. They block the flow of the Tao. The highest form of order, according to this text, is to have no administration at all, where everyone just moves in alignment with nature, like a school of fish or a flock of birds.
They don't have a manager telling them to turn left.
They just turn.
That sounds lovely in a poem. But we are talking about a community of real people living together. How do you run a society without administration? I mean, who decides who washes the dishes? Who decides who drives the tractor?
Well, that's where the butterfly effect comes in. The text leans really heavily on this concept. Because the universe is seen as holographic and interconnected, there's no such thing as a private action.
Okay.
If I'm angry or lazy or selfish, that energy ripples out and it degrades the whole community.
So the management isn't top-down, it's internal.
Yes. The slogan is, no private matters, all are public matters. Because everything is connected, you don't need a police force if everyone is policing their own internal alignment with truth and kindness. If you're fully aligned with the Tao, you'll wash the dishes because the dishes need washing.
Not because a boss told you to.
Exactly.
I have to be the skeptic here for a second. No private matters sounds incredibly invasive. It sounds like the death of privacy.
It is. And that's the trade-off. The source material is very upfront about this. To achieve this level of harmony, you surrender the self. You surrender the private sphere.
You're trading privacy for unity.
That's it.
So let's look at what that trade-off looks like in practice. The source lists 8 characteristics of this second home.
Right. First, no leaders, no hierarchy, no status. There is no president of the community.
Which leads right into the economic model. Own nothing, possess everything. That's a phrase that really stuck with me.
It's a crucial distinction. In the second home, nobody has a private bank account. Nobody owns a car or a house. But you have access to everything the community has.
So if you need a vehicle to go to town,
You take one. If you need food, you walk into the dining hall and you eat.
it's the ultimate subscription model. You own 0 assets, but you have unlimited access to the service.
That is a great way to put it. And the labor model follows that classic maxim, from each according to ability. Whether you were a CEO or a carpenter in your previous life, in the second home, you work based on what you can do, physically and mentally, not what your title was.
So there's no status attached to the work.
None. Cleaning the toilet is viewed as spiritually equal to writing a book.
Okay, so we've got communal property, no bosses. That's classic utopianism. But the source material takes a very sharp left turn when it gets to the social structure. We have to talk about the abolition of marriage.
This is the most radical pivot in the texts. Xu Feng argues that the family unit is the root of human selfishness.
Break that down for me. Why is having a family selfish? Most people would say family is where they learn to be unselfish.
Think about it structurally. A marriage creates a walled garden. It's my wife, my husband, my children, versus the rest of the world.
Right.
You hoard resources for your tiny unit. You prioritize your child over your neighbor's child. The text argues that as long as the family unit exists, universal love is impossible because you're biologically and socially wired to favor your own.
So to love everyone, you can't be special to anyone.
In a sense, yes. The second home proposes a global family. There are no husbands and wives.
And the children.
They're raised by the community as a whole. The source describes a system where children are not the property of their parents, they're children of the community. And the elderly aren't the burden of their biological kids, they're cared for by everyone.
It removes the anxiety of who will take care of me when I'm old by making the answer everyone.
It does. It solves the anxiety, but it dissolves that bond of intimacy that comes with a long-term partnership. The text would argue that what we call intimacy is often just attachment, and attachment leads to suffering. In fact, they have a mechanism to prevent attachment. It's called the flow.
This is the part about constantly moving, right?
Yes. Members constantly change their living quarters, their jobs, and yes, even their partners.
Why? That sounds exhausting. I just want to put my toothbrush in one spot and leave it there.
They do it to fight entropy.
Entropy, the tendency for things to fall apart.
Or to stagnate. The argument is that if you stay in the same room with the same person doing the same job for years, the energy stops flowing. You form cliques, you get bored, you develop these habits that just numb you. They call it the dead water phenomenon.
Oh.
So by shuffling the deck constantly, the community forces you to stay present, to stay fresh. You can't cling to anything, so you have to find stability inside yourself.
It's like being a shark. If you stop moving, you die.
But spiritually. Exactly. And it prevents the formation of power centers. If you're always moving, you can't build a fiefdom, you can't accumulate social capital. Everyone remains equal because everyone is in flux.
It's a fascinating, if terrifying, method of enforcing equality. But here's the paradox I noticed. They talk about God, heaven, and the Tao constantly. But the text explicitly bans religious rituals.
It is a paradox, but a deliberate one. They claim to be scientific in their spirituality. They view rituals, burning incense, kneeling, chanting as empty forms. They want the essence of religion, which is connection to the divine, without the politics of religion. So no rituals and absolutely no political activity. They want to exit the game of human governance entirely.
Which brings us to the kind of the key insight that actually made me stop and reread the page. It's the valuation calculation.
The price of a Zen grass name.
Right. The author, Sui Feng, he actually sits down and asks, what is membership in this community actually worth in dollars? And he doesn't use a stock valuation. He uses Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
It's a brilliant rhetorical maneuver. We all know Maslow. It's that pyramid. At the bottom, you've got physiological needs, food and shelter.
Right.
Then safety. Then social belonging. Then respect or esteem. And at the very top, self-actualization.
So walk us through the math. How does he get to the dollar figure from that?
He starts by asking, in the regular secular world, who actually achieves the top of that pyramid, who has total food security, total physical safety, total social respect, and the total freedom to pursue their own potential.
Very, very few people.
Right. We are talking presidents, billionaires, maybe a few superstars. Shifeng argues that to build a life in the capitalist world that guarantees all 5 levels of Maslow's pyramid, you'd need a net worth of roughly $100 million.
So that's the cost of entry for a self-actualized life in the regular world.
According to his calculation, yes, because below that number, you still have fear. Fear of losing your job, fear of lawsuits, fear of the market crashing, fear of being canceled.
So then he compares this to the Zen grass member.
Okay, so look at the member. Physiological needs. They eat organic communal food, check. Safety, no crime, no police. Guaranteed healthcare by the group, check. Social. You're never lonely. You're surrounded by a global family, 237, check.
And the top of the pyramid? Esteem and self-actualization.
This is the boldest claim. He argues that because there is no hierarchy, everyone receives equal respect, and because you don't have to work for a paycheck, you only work to contribute, you're free to unfold your nature.
You can write, garden, think.
Or create without the pressure of the market. You don't have to sell your art, you just make it.
So the logic is, a billionaire spends $100 million to get these needs met. A community member gets them met for free just by joining. Therefore, membership is worth $100 million.
It completely redefines wealth. It suggests that wealth isn't the pile of money. Wealth is the state of being that the money is supposed to buy.
And if you can skip the money and go straight to the state of being,
You've hacked the system.
It's a compelling logic, but
Yeah.
it assumes that the state of being in the community is actually comparable to the freedom of a billionaire. I mean, a billionaire can choose to go to Paris tomorrow.
Yeah.
A community member is, well, in the community.
That is the friction point. The text argues that the billionaire's freedom is an illusion because they're tethered by their assets, they have to manage the 100 million, they have to worry about security, heirs, taxes. They're slaves to their own possessions.
Whereas the Zengrass member has chaos freedom.
The freedom of having nothing to lose.
Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. That's the Janis Joplin definition of freedom.
It is, and it brings us right back to that Harvard study we started with. Remember the elite 3% who had a clear long-term goal?
Yeah.
Xu Feng is pitching this second home as the ultimate long-term goal. He's saying, don't aim to be the CEO, aim to be a celestial being.
A celestial being.
That's the terminology for the highest level of existence they strive for. The goal isn't just a happy life on Earth, it's using this life as a springboard to a higher dimension. The second home is essentially a training camp for heaven.
So it's a spiritual boot camp, disguised as a communist commune.
Where you strip away everything, your ego, your family, your property, just to see what's left.
You know, throughout this deep dive, I've been thinking about the difference between standard of living and quality of life. We usually think they're the same thing.
We do. We assume if we double our income, we double our quality of life.
But this source material just drives a wedge right between them. It argues you can have a standard of living that looks like poverty on paper-shared rooms, no car, simple clothes, but a quality of life that rivals a billionaire because the internal anxiety is gone.
It decouples happiness from consumption. And in a world where we're constantly told that the next purchase will fix us, that's a dangerous idea.
Dangerous.
Dangerous to the status quo. If people actually believed they could be happy with nothing but community and food, the entire global economy would collapse overnight. Our economy runs on the hamster wheel of desire. This philosophy says, step off the wheel.
But the price of stepping off is your autonomy. You become a cell in a larger organism. You lose the I.
And that is the question for you, the listener. The text promises that if you submit to this chaos, you get to enjoy every stage of life. You get the playfulness of childhood and the leisure of retirement all the time. No rat race in the middle.
It sounds like a dream to some and a complete nightmare to others.
Which usually means we're looking at something profound. It touches a nerve.
So, as we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with a thought experiment based on today's dive. It's a bit provocative, but I think it gets to the heart of what Xu Feng is really saying.
Go for it.
We all have our labels. I'm a podcaster, a husband, a homeowner. You're an expert, a parent, a taxpayer. These are the structures that hold us up. They tell us who we are. But imagine, just for a second, that you strip them all away.
All of them.
All of them. No job title, no bank balance, no my spouse or my house. If you were standing there, naked in the wind of chaos, with just your internal self, would you feel wealthy?
That is the $100 million question.
Because if your worth is tied to the structures, you're vulnerable. The structures can fall. But if it's tied to your alignment with reality, well, maybe that's the lesson of the Zen grass.
Wealth is what's left when you lose everything you own.
A heavy thought to carry into the rest of your day. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of the second home. It's definitely shifted my perspective on my next credit card bill. We'll catch you on the next one. Stay curious.